The air shivered with a heat that was not truly heat. A warmth older than the red sun climbing out of the Dothraki Sea's hazy dawn. It rolled in waves across the empty plain, stirring motes of ash that glittered before settling on char and bone. A ring of blackened earth marked the pyre's boundary. 10 dragon eggs had lain within those stones of sacrifice, and not a one remained. Where smoke should have lingered, there was only shifting light, a ripple of possibility made flesh. Daenerys Targaryen, barefoot upon the scorched ground, felt no pain, only the tremor of something vast moving beneath the skin of the world. 10 newborn shapes coiled around her, first as shadows, then as sinew and scale and ember. Their cries pierced the dawn like silver daggers, and in their mirrored pupils, she saw 14 years of exile unmade in a heartbeat. Drogo was ash behind her now, and so were her tears. The Dothraki who had followed her to this place balanced between wonder and terror. Many sank to their knees, foreheads pressed to earth. Some dared to look up, and were blinded by hope they did not yet understand. Jorah Mormont, face lit by flames that had gone, swallowed a prayer he could not name. When at last she spoke, her voice carried the timbre of burning cedar. "They are mine," she said, and the word mine echoed through the bones of every witness. Days later the Khalasar traveled at a crawl, a serpent of horse and wagon stretching across the red waste. Riders kept wide circles, uncertain how close they dared come to the brood. 2 of the larger hatchlings, Caesares, whose wings shimmered the deep purple of dusk, and Carlior, a pale gold, made sport of nipping at ponies until Dothraki steeds bolted and riders cursed. Yet each night, when the cold reached for marrow, the dragons returned to Daenerys, cupping themselves around her camp like braziers against a chill world. In the hours before dawn she fed them morsels of charred goat from her own plate, cutting away the better meat meant for a Khaleesi and tossing it to the snapping maws. She sang Valyrian lullabies her brother had mocked long ago, and each verse braided warmth through the dark like a hearth song. Jorah watched all of this from beyond the ring of Dothraki guards. He understood that her power was no longer simply royal. It was ancestral, near divine. The 12th day after the pyre, they came upon an abandoned city by a dry riverbed. Crumbling mud brick walls, broken minarets, a lonely ziggurat staring at the void where water once ran. Daenerys claimed it without question. Within those walls they would rest, drink from the last wells, and learn their new rhythm. She ordered Jorah to have the Unsullied, slaves freed 2 weeks prior, patrol the perimeter. The freedmen spoke little, but their spears whispered death. They had sworn loyalty to the Stormborn, with a fervor unlike any coin-forged contract. Inside the ziggurat's shadow, she knelt beside her smallest dragon, Nyrax, whose scales glowed the green of new-plucked limes. He wheezed, struggling to draw enough desert air for a growing furnace. Dany stroked the narrow ridges of his spine. "The sky will breathe for you soon," she promised. Yet she feared the desert could claim him the way it claimed all fragile things. She called for water, for shredded meat, for shade, and when dusk fell, she called for fire, flint on steel, braziers of camel dung and dry grass. The dragons gathered at her gesture, each exhaling small tributaries of flame until a pillar rose, a beacon seen for 100 leagues. The heat that cured Nyrax scorched the cracked adobe around them until the walls glittered like obsidian. Whispers traveled faster than horse. A Khaleesi with 10 fireworms. 10, not 3. 10, not myth. Ragged riders seeking plunder skulked near the city's edge each night, but fled when orange eyes blossomed. Dany let them flee. Fear was a coin she would spend later. Every demonstration cost her dragon's strength. They needed sleep, they needed flesh, and she needed patience. Somewhere beyond the rising plains lay ships, and beyond the ships lay the 7 kingdoms. On the 19th day, an envoy from Korth arrived, Exaros Odaxos himself, borne upon gilded palanquins and sweet promises. Behind him trailed a caravan heavy with iced fruit and bolts of suede silk. He bowed low before Daenerys beneath an improvised canopy of spears. "Mother of dragons," he said, voice smooth as melted honey, "Qarth would shelter your blessing from this cruel sun." His eyes flicked to the nearest hatchling gnawing a charred horse leg. Awe warred with calculation. 10 dragons meant a lever long enough to move the world. But 10 dragons also meant the world might crush the fingers that tried to grip it. Daenerys listened. She tasted the syllables of old elegance. Then she rose, every inch the daughter of kings. "I have slept on the sand and woken in glory," she answered. "Karth may open its gates if it chooses, but I will not beg water from a city. I will trade." She gestured to the bundles of dried dates and crates of locusts her people had foraged. "Here is my price. Ships. Ones no storm may shatter, and crews who fear no tale of dragons. Bring them to this place, and Karth will share in the dawn that is coming. Fail, and when my children grow they will remember which doors were closed." Sorrow smiled, yet sweat beaded at his temple. He bowed again, lower, promising return in 3 days. As his caravan receded across dunes, one of the hatchlings, red-winged Meraxes, rose and followed overhead for a league, her screech folding the horizon like silk. She returned at twilight, talons empty but hunger sharpened. In the quiet aftertension, Dany sought Jorah's counsel atop the ziggurat. Wind tugged at her silver-gold braid, carrying the smell of scorched sagebrush. "Do you trust him?" she asked. "I trust his fear," the knight replied. "That is something men rarely betray. Fear alone will not buy me a fleet." "You offered him wonder," Jorah said. "Wonder buys more than gold, when gold is common." Below them, unsullied torches circled the city's perimeter. Beyond those lines, the Dothraki tended fires of their own, separate yet near, as though proximity alone bound them to this new myth. She saw a boy no older than 6 chaste luminous Kriskar, a sapphire dragon whose breath glowed faintly in the dark, until his mother yanked him back. The dragon snapped once, playful, then banked into the night. Dany's heart tightened with perilous love. 10 dragons meant 10 chances for the world to tear at her heart. How did Aegon keep from losing himself? She asked the silence. "Hey, conquered quickly," Jorah answered. There was no time to dally in affection. "I must conquer," she murmured. "But not quickly. Not yet." The envoy returned on the 2nd day, sooner than pledged. 3 ships crested the horizon, deep-bellied cogs with black sails and names etched in Myrish runes. They anchored in the skeletal riverbed, planks thrown across silt like spiderweb bridges. Xaro dismounted in a flourish. "The thrice-blessed Triad stands at your service," he declared. Palm over heart. Crews paid for a year, no asks but quarter rations and their skin intact. Dany surveyed the vessels. Their hulls were weathered but sturdy, their masts tall enough to block the one sun. She summoned her captains. Rakaro, Dario, won from a skirmish days ago, and Jorah. Plans unfurled across the stern deck of the largest ship. Food stores, water casks, quarantine for dragons too large to cage yet too young to ride the thermals over open sea. Jorah argued for delay to test 1 or 2 beasts first. Dany shook her head. "If we parcel them, we lose the shock of number. All must sail together. When Westeros hears, they must hear 10 voices screaming." Dantel. On the morning of departure, the ziggurat city lay behind them like a forgotten dream. Riders ferried sacks of grain aboard. The dragons loomed restless. Some perched upon spars, claws gouging grooves in fur planks. Others prowled decks, tails sweeping sailors' ankles. Kriskar let out a plume that caught a banner. Men scrambled, beating cloth with wet hemp until steam rose. Daenerys stroked his neck, whispering restraint, feeling heat pulse beneath scales. As anchor chains groaned up from mud, a hush spread. Those too old, or set in their Dothraki ways, remained ashore. Mothers pressed palms to hearts, calling blessings in guttural tongues. For them, the silver-haired girl with fire-born serpent sailed into myth, taking a piece of their own stories with her. The first day at sea was mercifully calm. Caesarus rode thermals above the mainmast, carving lazy spirals. The smell of salt shocked lungs grown accustomed to dust. Daenerys stood at the prow, cloak snapping, eyes on the setting sun where Essos melted into copper. She pictured King's Landing's red walls, the scrawl of rooftops along Blackwater Bay, and atop them, the Iron Throne, a beast of blades forged by dragonfire. In her mind's theater she saw it softened, reshaped by her will, but not yet. First came landing, alliances, fear. 10 dragons, but a continent of men. Storms found them on the third night, clouds like anvils, hammers of lightning. The dragons reveled. They soared between forks of blue fire, shrieking delight. Sailors crossed themselves in half a dozen faiths. Caesarus dipped low, talons skimming whitecaps, returning with a writhing swordfish clutched through scales. When he dropped the catch upon deck, splinters flew. Crewmen leaped back, hands to ears as the dragon's victory roar swallowed thunder. Daenerys watched with pride and caution. She must allow their excesses now. They would need these memories of freedom when discipline later yoked them. The storm scattered the fleet by dawn. Her cog, fireborn, drifted alone under slate skies. Hrothgar circled close, protective. They found thrice Oath, the second ship, at midday, listing but intact, sails torn. The third, Windsmoke, vanished until dusk, re-emerging through driving rain accompanied by 2 smaller galleys flying Volantene colors. Their captain, a woman named Solara of the Silver Sutra, hailed them. She had lost half her oars to the storm and sought safe harbor for repairs. Jorah advised caution. Volantis bred slavers. Daenerys raised a spyglass and met the Volantene's gaze across roiling water. Solara's dark braid hung heavy with rain, but her posture was that of a captain who measured odds before drawing steel. Dany called for a rowboat. Jorah cursed softly yet went with her. They climbed slippery ropes aboard Windsmoke together. Solara knelt one knee. "They say you bear a storm's brood," she said in low Valyrian. "I saw them in the sky last night. 10. 10, Daenerys confirmed. "Then the sea is smaller than I believed." Solara rose. She told of a rebel faction in Volantis hungry for Valyrian return, disgusted by the old blood's slave brands. "Give me safe passage west," she said, "and I will swear my oars to your war." Daenerys studied her. A realist, not a sycophant. "Bring your ships in line," she agreed. "Obey my hand's commands. On Westerosi shores you will taste a new tide." Solara clasped wrists in warrior's oath. And so Daenerys gained 2 more hulls, ironwood decks rattling with potential. Weeks passed. Dragons grew. Their voices deepened. Flames lengthened. Decks required continual repair. Talons and tails were disobedient tools. Nirax, once sickly, now darted between ratlines with the agility of a barn swallow, his green scales gleaming like wet jade. At dusk Daenerys led them in flight drills. Circles around masts, dives toward bobbing targets, barrels thrown overboard, painted with lion sigils. Fire consumed those false Lannisters until grease, slicks, lapped hulls. Meanwhile, Jorah honed a war council. He plotted landing points along Westeros' southern coast, mapping tides, castles, loyalties. Storms and yields difficult cliffs, he warned. But they feared dragons more than storms. Ricardo argued for Old Town, wealth ripe for plunder. Dario, always flashing a sellsword grin, favored Dorne where heat would comfort the reptiles and passions, ran hot enough to birth alliances in bedchambers. Dany listened, weighing each counsel, remembering Viserys ranting of cities he'd never seen. At night she dreamed of her brother's molten crown, of her father's wildfire laughter, echoing through Red Keep corridors. She woke with the taste of iron in her mouth, and walked decks until silence returned. Each step punched notes of grief and ambition into the timbers. Somewhere ahead, her family's name would no longer be whispered with pity or fear. It would be sung. The fleet made landfall on Dragonstone first, the ancestral seat that had birthed her exile. Smoke plumed from the mountain's vent, greeting its queen. Daenerys rode Caesarys across churning spindrift, wings beating thunder into sea air. She landed upon the courtyard once patrolled by Stannis Baratheon's men. The few garrison knights, gaunt and underpaid, scattered when dragons dropped like comets. Jorah, Dario, and 50 Unsullied followed up the winding causeway, banners snapping. They met only token resistance. A crossbow quarrel that ricocheted off Hrothgar's scales, a knight who died of fright before steel left its sheath. Soon, the courtyard belonged to House Targaryen again. Dany walked through archways carved with dancing dragons and wept softly, though she did not hide her tears. To claim with fire was easy, to let stone remember you, that was the harder victory. She left a third of her forces to refit, stock cellars, prepare airy caverns. Dragons took to the sky in pairs, sniffing currents, mapping their birthright. Dany stayed 1 week. She climbed Dragonmon's black stairs nightly, feeling heat seep through souls, hearing the volcano hum ancient lullabies. On the 7th evening, she descended with obsidian shards, and shared them among her captains. "We carry our mother's bones with us," she said, "for the world we set ablaze." Sails unfurled again. This time, they crossed to Messie's Hook, under cover of moonless night. Scouts whispered of Renly Baratheon marching north to siege King's Landing, while his brother Stannis prepared fleet and wildfire. The realm was split by crowns, none of which shone as bright as dragonfire. Westeros' confusion was Daenerys' opportunity. Strike where eyes were elsewhere. They chose Duskendale, a harbor of middling walls but rich stores, lightly held by loyalists who wore the stag of Storm's End. Fireborn and her sisters slipped into harbor fog before dawn. Dragons shadowed above. The first who knew of invasion were gulls scattering. The second were guards roused by a roar that rattled shutters. Caesaris dove, flame blooming like crimson flower upon ramparts. Gates sagged under heat and fell inward. Unsullied poured through smoke, shields locked. Dothraki screamers followed, hooves ringing steel on cobblestone. A new rhythm for a people born to grasslands. Daenerys entered last, mounted upon Carlior, whose gold wings caught first light. She saw townsfolk kneeling or fleeing, saw a sept aflame where sparrows prayed. She commanded water lines to spare the innocents. Mercy bought more than gold. In the market square, she summoned the local lord, Sir Hamus Darklyn, trembling behind 24 men-at-arms. Dragons perched on rooftops above him, like gargoyles come alive. Sir Hamus dropped to a knee. "I yield Duskendale," he rasped. "Name your terms." "Swear to House Targaryen," she said. "Open your coffers to feed my host. Send ravens proclaiming my return. Harm no loyalist of Baratheon who lays down arms. They will be offered choice, oath or exile." She paused, giving weight to the alternative unspoken. Above them, Merax's unfurled wings to their fullest span, and Sir Hamus felt shadow swallow him. He placed his sword at her feet. Victories multiplied. Rook's Rest fell next, then the Rosby holdings without a sword drawn. The name Targaryen rode ahead, borne by wind and terror, both. Yet Daenerys refused to lose pace with her dragon's growth. She drilled them daily, teaching obedience to whistle commands coded by pitch. Nirax now detonated burst flames wider than the hull of a warship. Kriskar could hover on a single wing beat, releasing fire downward like rain. She began flight lessons astride each beast in turn, trusting ropes tied to saddle hooks hammered by Volantine artisans. One windless afternoon above the Blackwater Rush she practiced formation. 3 dragons abreast, 4 following, 3 bringing rear, each breath timed. The river steamed beneath until eels floated belly up. Her captains watched from a distant ridge, mouths agape. Dotting. Jorah murmured a single word. Unstoppable. But the realm awoke. Highgarden forged alliance with Renly. Riverlords measured rumor against fealty. King's Landing closed its gates, bells tolling dread. Within the Red Keep, Queen Cersei weighed wildfire caches and prayed to lion gods. Varys listened. Spiders spun. Across Blackwater Bay, on a stony rise near the ruins of Stinky Wood, Daenerys convened war council in a silk pavilion lit by lanterns of beaten gold. Maps sprawled across cedar tables, ink strokes measuring heartbeats of cities. Rakharo urged assault on King's Landing before Stannis' fleet arrived. Seize the throne while lion and stag quarreled. Dario counseled dash and seduction, promising gates would open if gift and threat were twined. Jorah recommended consolidation. Fortify crownlands, win hearts of small folk. Let dragons mature another season. Daenerys walked among them, fingertips trailing along parchment coasts. She felt the weight of 500 souls waiting outside for orders, and beyond them, tens of thousands who would bleed whichever banner flapped highest. She paused by Dragonstone's sigil inked near the map's edge. Home had once meant nothing but memory. Now it was an anchor amid tempest. She straightened. "We strike the heart," she said softly. Silence thickened. "But not tomorrow. We will peel away King's Landing's allies first. A siege broken before it forms is no siege at all. We will take Storm's End. Venom, Edeno." Preparations consumed a fortnight. Scouts reported that Renly still lingered in the Stormlands, hosting feasts, his banners bright as spring. His strength lay in chivalry and numbers, hers in fire and myth. As the host marched south, Daenerys sent ravens ahead, white feathers dipped in crimson ink. Bend the knee and become flameborn. Resist and become ash. Some lords laughed, some quivered. Most waited, breath-baited, for proof. Proof came at Bronzegate, where Renly's advance scouts clashed with the Dothraki outriders. 10 dragons cut the sky, but only one breathed. Caesares, a single plume turned Renly's green standard to sparks. Not a man among the living scoffed after that. Still, victory was far. 10 dragons could not hold every castle, nor sniff out each betrayal. Supplies lagged. The Crownlands farms had been burned by Lannister reavers months earlier. Villagers eyed unsullied rations, but Dany forbade pillage. She dug trenches for communal kitchens, emptied Rosby's grain stores to feed refugees, following her army like dust clouds. Her quartermasters warned of rot, of gaps longer than marches. Again she ignored them, trusting hunger, sated now, would become loyalty branded for life. On a gray dawn before they reached Storm's End, a riderless horse galloped into camp, froth at lips. Its saddle bore Renly's stag. Men seized reins, delivered the beast to Daenerys' commanders. As they inspected, thunder echoed, not from sky but from wings. Carlior landed, tail thrashing, senses fierce. The horse reared as if to break its neck. Jorah fetched the scroll tied to the saddle pommel. "Wax broken," he read. "Renly dead. Shadow born of king. Matter of dark sorcery. Brienne, in flight. Dot'Tagi. Host leaderless. Renly men seek new star." Shock rippled. Dario laughed low. "One less crown to melt," he said. Dany's thoughts churned colder. If whispers of sorcery were true, Stannis wielded power darker than wildfire. Dragons burned flesh, but shadows burned certainty. She dismissed counsel, walking alone and among tents until dusk. The sky brooded violet, torches threw halos around pikes. At fever's pitch of thought she felt a tug deeper than resolve. A voice she did not recognize yet had always known. Dracarys, it hummed. Balerion for Dragonfire. The command. The promise. She turned on her heel, sought Jorah. "We march at first light," she declared. "No parley. Storm's End is ours." The fortress rose as thunderhead above gray-green surf, walls thick enough to defy catapults. Yet stone did not frighten flame. Caesaris, Kriskar, and Merax's soared, breath-turning battlements to molten flow. The gatehouse collapsed inward. Unsullied advanced in disciplined waves. Shields fending arrows that hissed then fell screaming. Shafts ignited mid-flight. Dothraki curved around the keep skirt, lances catching retreating pikemen. Above it all, Daenerys circled upon Carlior, the dragon's gold wings scattering sun across black smoke. Within hours, the castle's halls echoed with hoofbeats and the clang of surrender. Lord Mathis Rowan knelt in the great hall, presented Stannis banners folded. He begged clemency for garrison wives and sons. Daenerys granted it, demanding fealty once their wounds were bound. She declared the castle a refuge for Stormlanders willing to kneel. Those loyal to Baratheon might take ships north unharmed. The word spread like salve through fear-bruised spirits. Many chose her banner, soot black with a 3-headed dragon overlaid in white, to mark rebirth. With the fortress secured, she summoned her brood to the courtyard. 10 dragons roared as one, a chorus that shook even the bedrock foundations. Gulls wheeled in panicked flocks. Waves dashed salt against windows. The castle floor steamed where flame had spilled. At that moment, watching villagers above parapets, knew old houses had awakened. Night came. Daenerys stood on the ramparts, cloak whipping, eyes across the sea toward King's Landing's distant glow. Somewhere in that maze of marble and blood, Cersei Lannister played her games, little imagining the fire descending. Somewhere beyond, Stannis plotted in shadows. All the pieces moved, yet in her bones, Dany sensed the board itself tilting toward her hand. Carlier landed beside her, folding wings with a metallic clatter. His great head lowered until one golden eye, big as a shield, looked into hers. Flame flickered behind translucent membrane. She saw her reflection waver in it. Small, human, and yet crowned by airborne spark. She laid a palm against hot scale. The dragon's breath gusted over battlements, sweeping strands of hair across her face. "We will not rush," she told him, though he could not understand words. "We will burn them in time. But first, let them feel the heat under their doors. Let them dream of us." Below, the army settled into Storm's End. Banners draped over soot, forging new names in hushed voices. Across the kingdoms, ravens flew, bearing news that seemed impossible. The Dragon Queen had returned, not with 3 monsters but 10, each a storm in flesh. Some lords clasped hearts beneath furs, others sharpened spears, all listening for wing beats on the wind. In the hush before dawn, Daenerys retired to her chamber carved within the great drum tower. She unbound silver braids and let hair fall across shoulders. Outside shutters, dragons murmured, a lullaby of crackling embers. She lay upon pillows smelling of sea salt and smoke, closed her eyes, and dreamed of fires yet to come. Fires slow and inexorable, shaping thrones and destinies alike into something unrecognizable from the brittle iron chair her ancestors forged. 5 hours of story time awaited her pages, and she would write them in flame. The halls of Storm's End seemed to vibrate with a new energy, a resonance born of the dragons roosting on its towers and the queen who had claimed its hearth. Though days had passed since the fortress's fall, the acrid tang of smoke still drifted through corridors. Charred arrow slits and melted stone testified to what had happened here. But life pressed on. Armor clinked. Hooves echoed in the yard. Fires crackled in freshly dug braziers, warding off the damp chill that clung to the walls, where salt-laden winds battered from the sea. Daenerys Targaryen stood in the great hall near the dais, once occupied by Baratheons. 10 dragons were too many to house safely in an enclosed space, so they lived on the battlements above, or soared across the stormy skies around the keep. But she kept her vantage near this anchor, a seat of power that felt simultaneously foreign and faintly familiar. Whenever she looked upon the ancient seat, she imagined Stannis or Renly conferring with their vassals in this same hall, the flicker of torches catching in the eyes of would-be allies. Now it was her banner, a black field with a white 3-headed dragon that draped the bare stone. It had been swiftly painted by a handful of freedmen who took pride in forging symbols of her cause. The standard hung heavy with the humidity that rolled in off Shipbreaker Bay. Her newly formed court bustled each morning with the petty concerns of lords and soldiers, ration allocations, patrolling schedules, betting for the Dothraki in an environment they had never known. They grumbled about the cold stones beneath their bedding, about the salt spray in their hair. But for all their complaints, the riders approached her with the same raw adoration they once gave to Khal Drogo, tempered by awe at the brood of dragons that soared above them. Dothraki men who had never bowed in their lives lowered themselves reverently when she crossed the yard, offering guttural greetings to their moon of my life, which she accepted with a quiet nod. She had not simply captured a castle. She had staked a claim to the beating heart of the Stormlands, setting a wedge between the capital and any forces seeking to move north or east. As Jorah Mormont explained, night after night over the broad oak table in the council chamber, securing Storm's End delivered Daenerys a stepping stone to King's Landing. Traders, messengers, ravens, and rumors all funneled through this old fortress like fish through a funnel net. But it also painted a target on her. House Lannister, House Tyrell, and perhaps Stannis Baratheon's remaining loyalists in the Crownlands, would soon realign their strategies to answer her threat. That thought weighed on her more heavily than any nighttime chill. Every time she tried to sleep, her mind filled with half-real images of wildfire stashes, secret alliances, and the intangible shape of Stannis' rumored sorcery. She had not yet seen these shadows that killed Renly, but she had heard enough frightened whispers to know that her dragons might not be the only living magic in the realm. And she wondered in her quieter moments how Valyrian fire would stand against the kind of darkness that slid under doors and cut men's throats as they slept. Late on the 5th evening after taking Storm's End, Daenerys climbed the worn steps to the ramparts. High above the courtyard, the wind struck with briny force, whipping her silver-gold hair free of the braids she had woven in the morning. She let it swirl. The moon hung behind clouds, a pale disk. From up here she could see the dragons curled or perched on every suitable ledge. A few dozed in the swirling air, eyes half-lidded, tails drooping lazily across stone parapets. A faint orange glow emanated from their mouths or nostrils now and again, like embers kindled by each breath. Rakaro stood near one such slumbering beast, Merax's, whose wings were the color of garnet. His copper braids rustled in the wind as he lowered his head, in a gesture halfway between curiosity and deference. The Dothraki blood rider glanced over when Dany approached. His face bore admiration and a lingering question. She had told him earlier in the day that they would send outriders to gather intelligence, but she had not yet set the final command. She spoke quietly, though the wind shredded her voice. "We will send 24 riders along the Stormlands roads at dawn. They must wear no sigils, travel as if they're any wandering band seeking a strong leader or a bit of plunder." Rakaro nodded. "They will listen, Khaleesi. They will watch. They will find the words you want." Daenerys placed a gentle hand on Merax's flank. The dragon made a subdued chirr, curled its long neck closer to itself, a plume of smoke rising from its nostrils. "They must see who rallies to me, who hesitates, and who might turn cloak. We have frightened many, I know. But fear can be harnessed. Or it can spark new alliances if we let them glimpse another possibility." Rakaro's lips twitched at the corner, not quite a smile. "Fear makes men bow quicker than they stand." "Yes," she whispered. "But if all they do is bow in fear, they will turn on me the moment the wind changes. That is not the realm I want." She let her hand fall from the dragon's side and turned to walk toward the next parapet section, Rakaro pacing behind. Better to earn loyalty that is fed by more than terror. That was the truth she had come to, somewhere between the swirling desert sands and the ocean storms. If she wanted to be more than a conqueror of ash, she needed her father's cruelties to remain in the grave with him. The Targaryen name was a coin minted in both gold and poison. Her dragons announced power. Her actions would decide whether power was the only currency left. When she returned to her private chamber, she found Jorah Mormont waiting with a letter. By the tension in his shoulders, it was more than a petty squabble. He offered the parchment, wax unsealed. "The Raven arrived an hour ago," he said, "from Blackwater Bay." She held it to the candlelight. The lines were penned in a crabbed hand, likely a paid scribe's. She read, "My queen, the city braces for war from north and south. Tyrell banners approach from the Rose Road to join the Lannisters. Stannis' ships gather. Queen Cersei fortifies the city walls and ports. There is rumor she will open the royal vaults to hire the Golden Company from Essos if they can arrive in time. The small folk grow desperate. Already bread riots have begun. The bells ring. Varys sees and hears all. Choose your hour well." She let the parchment curl against her palm. "Varys," she murmured. "He is not shy with half-truths. Yet this letter seems sincere." Jorah nodded. "They say he serves the realm above all. He has reason to want you on the throne, or reason enough to invite more chaos. But it matches what our own scouts have told us. The Tyrells have allied with the Lannisters through Margaery's betrothal to Joffrey. That means Highgarden's wealth and armies bolster the crown." She pressed her lips together. "The Golden Company." Sel's once founded by a Targaryen bastard. They're dangerous, well-disciplined, and more expensive than any other company across the sea. Cersei will pay, if she thinks it keeps her son secure. The question is whether we move before they land or after, and whether the city's own gates might open to you, if the small folk believe you have come to lift them from the clutches of tyranny. Daenerys exhaled. They will not open gates out of pure hope. They must see how we treat them. Here, in the Stormlands, we feed the small folk from our own rations when we can. We spare those who lay down their arm. But I need more than rumor to carry that message across the Crownlands. She paced, glancing at her reflection in a polished metal mirror propped on the table. A face too young, sometimes she thought, for these decisions. Yet, it was hers to carry. If I storm King's Landing by dragonfire, I become what they fear my father was. But if I linger too long, the Tyrells will fortify the capital with their harvest. Jorah placed a hand on the hilt of his sword, as if steadying himself. Have you considered sending envoys to Highgarden? Marguerite Tyrell is rumored to be clever. She might prefer peace to war. Lady Olenna, the Queen of Thorns, is no fool either. Dany's eyes flicked over. You suggest an alliance with those betrothed to the Lannisters? He shrugged. Alliances shift. If the Tyrells see you as the inevitable victor, they might break from the Lannisters before shedding blood. That would be a coup. Or, at the very least, they might remain neutral until the tide turns. She let the idea settle. 1,000 concerns jostled in her mind. Time, loyalty, fear, ambition. Daario Naharis is half Sellsword, half scoundrel. He might be the one to speak with Lady Olenna in the right mixture of boldness and charm. Rakharo too, if he can stifle his disgust for the softness of green lands. But is it worth the risk of sending them? You must use every weapon you have, Jorah said quietly. Not just flame. Diplomacy can be as lethal as a claw. Her nod was slow. Very well. I will write letters. If they respond, we'll see what chance remains. But first, we solidify the Stormlands. We can't march on King's Landing only to have a rebellion at our backs. She thought of the newly captured lords, those who had bent the knee to her. Some might keep faith out of either loyalty or fear. Others might wait for a better moment to rise up. As she had told Rakharo, fear alone was brittle. She dismissed Jorah, sat at her table, and dipped a quill in ink. By candlelight she composed messages to the Tyrells, formal lines citing her rightful place, her father's blood, her promise of mercy, and her vow to create a Westeros that flourished under a queen who would feed her people, rather than starve them. She kept the tone gracious, as if she were offering them an opportunity to stand with her as proud stewards of the Reach. Her script was not perfect. She had learned the common tongue in her youth, but had never practiced the refined calligraphy of a royal. Still, the letters were legible, the words earnest. When she finished, she scattered fine sand over the ink to dry it. Then she sealed the parchment with red wax, pressing into it a signet that bore the Targaryen crest. Hers was a stylized version to mark the new era, but it carried enough weight to speak for itself. With a tired sigh, she snuffed the candle and let the darkness claim the corners of the chamber. A shape moved beyond the window, the silhouette of a dragon's wing. She heard a low rumble that might have been thunder or a distant roar. Then only waves, lashing the cliffs below. She dreamt that night of a throne room, lit by green fire, the pillars melting, an inhuman shriek echoing. When she woke, the sheets were tangled around her ankles, and she felt the drum of her heart in her ears. In the days that followed, a subtle shift took hold in Storm's End. Villagers from the outlying hamlets began to creep closer, lured by the possibility of protection and the curiosity of seeing dragons. Children peered between the gates, eyes wide. Small folk who had once fled at the sight of Dothraki now inched near, coaxed by rumors that the new queen's men did not pillage. There was bread at her table, coarse but sufficient. The difference from past wars was stark. Any other army might have burned and taken. Her men might have done so if she were absent. But Daenerys' decrees carried sharp consequences for those who disobeyed. In the courtyard each day, She presided over minor disputes. She accepted worn-out pleas from farmwives, whose fields had been trampled. She offered to pay them from the seized Baratheon treasury, a modest sum, enough to replant. With every small gesture, she chipped away at fear. A blacksmith approached one afternoon, trembling with hope. He offered his services forging replacement horseshoes, arrowheads, and shield rivets for her knights. In return, he asked only for enough gold to buy grain for his ailing wife. Daenerys asked for his name, Bronnes, and took his hand in hers, telling him it was done. She commissioned him to craft steel claws that might cap the tips of her unsullied spears, and light but sturdy harness buckles for the dragon's saddles. He nodded vigorously, tears in his eyes, and left to begin the work. Yora reminded her that the treasury was not infinite, but she believed that small acts of humanity would resonate far beyond their cost. Within the castle's old library, though library was generous, as it consisted mostly of crates with a few moldy ledgers, Daenerys lounged in a shaft of sunlight, reading her letter to the Tyrells with an amused twist to his mouth. The sellsword-turned-envoy wore a flamboyant patchwork of dyed leather, gold buckles, and a purple sash. When she approached, he stood and bowed low, every inch the courteous mercenary. "You want me to deliver these words of sweet promise?" he asked. "I can be sweet if needed." He flourished the letter. "But they might not open their gates just because I flash a grin." She almost smiled. "I'd never assumed that you alone could melt the heart of Lady Olenna. But your skill with words might help. I'm sending Rakuro as well. He will cut down any footpads or bandits on the road. And we will dispatch another group to the Tarth lands, to see if Brienne's kin might be willing to speak with us, given her loyalty to Renly." Dario cocked his head. "Trying all corners of the Stormlands, my queen. All corners of the Seven Kingdoms, if I must. The more allies we make, the fewer battles we face." She took the letter back from him and rolled it carefully. "Do not promise anything that I have not already pledged. Do not swear marriages I won't agree to. But if they seem eager, send a raven at once. I will parley. Perhaps I can meet them in the field under a banner of peace." His eyes gleamed. "And if they think to take you captive during such a meeting?" Her smile lacked warmth. "I have 10 dragons." Dario let out a low chuckle. "Oh, you do." She left him to prepare. By nightfall, 2 small but elite parties rode out from Storm's End. One led by Dario westward toward Bitterbridge on the Mander, the other by Rakaro to scout Roserade cross traffic. By now, the Tyrell host might be nearing the capital, or might be encamped, or might have already begun negotiations with the Lannisters. The deal was complicated, but Daenerys believed in reading every piece of the board. So far, every rumor she heard indicated that the capital itself was a tinderbox. Cersei hoarding supplies, Tyrion Lannister rumored to have contrived some monstrous chain across Blackwater Bay, and the common folk pressed to their limits. If she appeared too weak, the Lannisters would strike at her. If she let them unite with Stannis' scattered forces or some other ally, she might be fighting a 2-front war. Still, she cautioned herself not to race headlong into a confrontation. Her brood needed to grow. Already she could see the changes in them. Nyrax, the one who had been ill in the desert, now boasted thick, glossy green scales that reflected sunlight like polished jade. His wingspan had nearly doubled in the month since they arrived on Westeros shores. Carlier, the golden hatchling, was no longer truly a hatchling, nearly the length of 2 warhorses from snout to tail tip. Daenerys had taken him flying twice, strapped in a harness, soaring above the choppy waters near the fortress. He responded to her command with steady loyalty, though he still sometimes became distracted by passing gulls. She met with her unsullied captains and Slara of the Volantine rebels, who had anchored 2 of her ships at the coastline, using them as floating supply depots. Solara was a quick-witted woman with a shaved head, a cunning mind for logistics, and a deep appreciation for the dragons that soared overhead. She spoke often of Volantis' old ties to Valyria, and how the triumphant re-emergence of dragonkind was rumored to cause ripples across the free cities. If Daenerys succeeded here, new alliances might spring up among those who resented the old slaver aristocracies. As always, there was a swirl of possibility, trade routes, political marriages, wealth beyond measure, and also the risk that the slavers would back the Lannisters to maintain the status quo. Daenerys listened to Slara's counsel, grateful for her pragmatic approach. She was not enthralled by visions of glory. She was enthralled by the chance for real change, which made her a valuable ally. Soon, small successes multiplied. More blacksmiths and tanners drifted into Storm's End, offering to work for fair coin. Freedmen from Essos, once forced to row Stannis galleys, found their way to her cause. A handful of hedge knights trickled in, battered shields on their backs, seeking a cause worth following. She required no oaths on the first day of arrival. She let them see the dragons with their own eyes. That, more than any speech, convinced them of her legitimacy. Even the Dothraki, for all their brashness, seemed oddly protective of these new arrivals. Perhaps it amused them to see how these scrawny men trembled at the sound of beating wings. Every evening Daenerys walked the walls. She passed her palm along the stone ramparts. She felt the sea wind cutting across her face, smelled the salt in her hair, listened to the shrieks of the gulls mingling with the rasp of her dragons. She watched the horizon, expecting sails from King's Landing or from Dragonstone with new tidings. Occasionally she glimpsed fishing vessels or traders who gave the fortress a wide berth, unsure whether to trust the rumored Dragon Queen's mercy. Each night, she returned to the same recurring dream. A throne of swords that glowed molten under dragonfire, and people cheering or screaming. She could never tell which. After 9 days, Dario's raven arrived. The message was short, in his florid script. The rose might yet turn from the lion. Olenna Tyrell invites discourse. Bitterbridge in a fortnight. Bring a show of strength. She regrets the war but wants to hear you out. I remain ever your devoted blade. Dariod. Daenerys read it aloud to her council. Jorah rubbed his chin. Rakaro snorted his approval. Grey Worm, the chosen leader of her Unsullied, remained silent, as was his custom, but his stern posture conveyed readiness. The men agreed that an audience with the Tyrell matriarch could shift the entire southern power balance. Jorah reminded them that the Tyrell armies could muster near 40,000 foot soldiers, plus thousands of cavalry. If those forces sided with Daenerys, King's Landing would be nearly encircled, but the meeting was not without risk. Olenna was known for her sharp mind, and if the Tyrells still saw an advantage with the Lannisters, they might seek to capture or kill Daenerys on the road. 10 dragons were formidable, but ambushes could come in many forms. Then we must show them a fraction of our strength, Daenerys said. I will go with 3 dragons, not all. Enough to demonstrate power, not enough to leave Storm's End undefended. She glanced at Jorah. You and Grey Worm will command here in my absence. Keep the fortress secure. If word comes that we've been trapped at Bitterbridge, unleash the others. Jorah's face darkened at the prospect. I would rather accompany you, my queen. I need your counsel, but I need you more here. They might see this journey as a chance to strike my seat of power while I am gone. You understand war better than most. Guard our home. I trust Grey Worm with the Unsullied, but your experience in Westeros is more vital. He bowed his head reluctantly. As you command. She called for Rakaro, who stomped into the chamber in dusty boots, face set in a grim line. Blood of my blood, she said, slipping momentarily into the Dothraki tongue. Will you ride with me to Bitterbridge, to meet the Rose Men? I will ride with you anywhere, he said, crossing an arm over his chest. To these reach lords who smell of flowers, to the haunted city of your father's seat, anywhere. She nodded, grateful. Thank you. She glanced at Grey Worm, who stood at attention near the chamber's door. Fortify the gates, double the watch. No one leaves or enters without our knowledge. Grey Worm saluted, voice level. It will be done. Blood of my blood. D. They spent the next days assembling a modest retinue. 50 Dothraki riders, another 50 knights and sellswords with proven loyalty, and a few outriders who knew the roads. Daenerys would take Carlier, Caesarius, and Meraxes, the largest and most obedient among her brood. She chose them carefully. Carlier was often her mount, the golden symbol of the queen's magnificence. Caesarius flew with a near-regal bearing, scales shimmering purple-black, and possessed a fearsome roar that froze foes in place. Meraxes, garnet-winged, had the best stamina in flight. The others, Kriskar, Nyrax, and the 5 smaller siblings, would remain at Storm's End, roosting. Nyrax had grown but was still somewhat temperamental and prone to wandering off in search of new curiosities. When dawn arrived on the day of departure, Daenerys donned leather riding gear reinforced at the shoulders and thighs, newly fashioned by the blacksmith Brane. It was dyed a dark slate color that almost matched the clouds drifting overhead, and embroidered with a discreet Targaryen sigil on the right breast. She wore no heavy crown, only a light circlet of dragonsteel that Slara had brought from Volantis, a slender piece that gripped her temples. A short cloak in black wool was clasped at her neck with a silver pin. Her hair, braided loosely, fell down her back. She looked every inch a warrior queen rather than a court figure. The courtyard was alive with her retinue's preparations. Horses whinnied, men busied themselves tying bundles of supplies to saddles, and 3 dragons hunched on the upper walls, tails swinging impatiently. The morning air crackled with possibility. Rakaro helped her mount Carlier, whose golden scales threw back shards of early sunlight. She settled into the saddle with a practiced grip on the reins. Though dragons didn't truly need reins in the same way horses did, the harness provided a point of control and stability, especially at breakneck altitudes. She could feel Carlier's powerful muscles shift beneath her, hear his low rumble as he stretched his neck. Every twitch of his wings reminded her of the precarious bond that made such rides possible. She looked down at her gathered people, knights from Storm's End wearing improvised Targaryen emblems, Dothraki with curved arcs, freedmen from Essos, who had chosen to stand beside her rather than remain behind. It was a strange patchwork, but it was hers. "Fly!" she commanded in Valyrian. Carlier's wings snapped downward, unleashing a blast of wind that scattered dust and hay. The courtyard fell away in a dizzying rush. Her heart leapt, a mixture of elation and terror. Caesarus and Meraxes followed in formation, each with a Dothraki rider clad in harness straps behind the scaled ridges of neck and shoulders. The rest of her company would travel by land, riding along the coastal roads, eventually turning inland. They had arranged a rendezvous point a few days' ride from Bitterbridge, near a small orchard. Daario had promised to mark the meeting spot with a bright turquoise banner. From there, they would approach the Tyrell camp together. As Storm's End shrank behind her, Daenerys cast a backward glance. The castle's thick walls looked almost small from this vantage. Dragons had a way of humbling even the grandest of architecture. Yet she felt a pang of concern, leaving it in Jorah's hands. He was loyal, but her enemies would sense an opening if they knew she was away. Still, she had chosen this course. She tightened her grip and willed Carlier to climb higher, cutting through a layer of gray cloud that left beads of moisture on her face. The air became cooler, the wind sharper. Below, the stormland spread out in a patchwork of rocky hills, twisted trees and coastal inlets. Here and there she spied farmsteads, smoke rising from chimneys, and roads that looked like thin threads winding away. She tried to gauge the vantage of a small folk living in these lands. They must have heard of dragons, might even have glimpsed them overhead. But what did they think? Did they cower in barns, or run outside to watch the passing silhouettes overhead? Did they see her as a liberator or a new tyrant? Time would tell. By midday, they touched down in a meadow near a shallow stream to allow the dragons to rest and drink. The retinue on horseback arrived several hours later. Sweaty and windblown, they set up a makeshift camp. Nothing grand. Only a few tents and bedrolls around a fire. Dany did not demand royal quarters, nor did she order the local villagers to surrender anything. Instead, she had brought her own supplies. The Dothraki mounted watch, scouring the horizon for possible threats, while her knights patrolled the outskirts. It was a modest parade, designed not to provoke but to defend. That night, she crouched by the water's edge, washing her hands and face under pale moonlight. She could hear the dragons shifting in the shadows beyond camp, rustling tall grasses, occasionally letting out a hiss or a throaty rumble. Nearby, a few men bantered quietly. They were half in awe of the creatures, half fearful. She could sense their questions. What if the dragons grew hungry enough to eat them in the dead of night? Did the queen truly command these beasts, or did they allow her to think she commanded them? She dipped her hands again, letting the cold water soothe her. She recalled crossing the red waste, parched and desperate, with no surety that her eggs would hatch. The memory of that funeral pyre felt so distant now. Though it had only been a handful of moons, so much had changed. She was not the timid exiled princess who let her brother torment her. She was a conqueror, with pieces of the realm bending under her flame. In the morning, they pressed on. The weather turned damp, spitting rain. Flight was more difficult under these conditions, so Daenerys and the other dragon riders soared low, occasionally landing to keep pace with the horsemen. She did not wish to arrive too far ahead of the rest, lest she and her dragons be isolated if a Tyrell ambush awaited. The roads grew wider, the fields more cultivated as they neared the Reach, known for its fertile lands. She saw groves of fruit trees, expanses of golden grass, small throngs of sheep and cattle. Some had been left unattended, their shepherds likely taken by the war or hiding from roving troops. They encountered a few stragglers, peasants dragging carts with battered possessions, heading toward the fabled safety of Highgarden, or any walled town. When they saw dragons overhead, they cowered by the roadsides. Daenerys dispatched a few knights with gentle words, offering them leftover bread or directions to Storm's End if they sought refuge. Some muttered prayers, uncertain what to make of this foreign queen with beasts of flame. Others seemed on the edge of tears, exhausted by war. It broke her heart to witness the toll on these innocents. Conquest looked so grand from the outside, but traveling these roads revealed the heartbreak that always accompanied it. At last they drew near the orchard where Dario had said he would wait. The turquoise banner fluttered on a makeshift pole near a stand of poplar trees. Daenerys felt a small stir of relief. He had not been waylaid, at least. She guided Carlier down in a graceful arc, landing lightly on damp grass. The retinue of horsemen followed, forming a semicircle around her, as they waited for further orders. Meraxes and Caesares landed behind her in a rush of wind. Dario emerged from the tree line, that roguish grin upon his face. Though it had been less than 2 weeks, he acted as if greeting a lover after a long absence. Bowing with theatrical flourish, he exclaimed, "My queen, you are as radiant as the sun, even in this dreary weather." She raised a brow at him, sliding from Carlior's saddle with Rakaro's assistance. "You have news, I trust." His grin narrowed. "I met with Lady Olenna in a small pavilion near Bitterbridge. She traveled with Margaery, Sir Loras, and a modest escort. They pitched a veritable feast in the field, as if they hadn't a care in the world. I told them you would arrive with a demonstration." Her gaze flicked to the orchard's clearing. "And how receptive were they?" He shrugged, a theatrical gesture that made his colored clothes ripple. "Lady Olenna is cagey. She flays men with her tongue, but I believe they are open to the possibility of withdrawing support from the Lannisters if the right terms are offered. In truth, she asked about your nature, whether you are as mad as your father. I assured her you are not. She asked if your dragons devour children. I assured her they do not, unless threatened." He gave a wink. "We parted on amicable terms. She wishes a formal meeting tomorrow at midday, a league up the road from Bitterbridge." Daenerys drew a long breath. "And their army?" Dario's smile faded. "They have tens of thousands encamped around Bitterbridge, and thousands more streaming in daily. Even with 10 dragons, it would be no small confrontation if they chose to turn on you. But I saw no sign of an ambush being prepared. If Lady Olenna wanted to kill you, she'd have easier ways than inviting you to stroll into a field." Rakaro spat. "We will bring our own watchers. The Tyrell host is large, but their horses are not Dothraki horses, and their blades are not our blades." Daenerys placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Remember, we do not come here to provoke them into a battle. If the negotiations fail, we leave. That is the advantage of flight. Dragons can simply ascend." Dario nodded. "Precisely. When they see those scaled darlings in full majesty, They might be swayed to see reason. Dany looked to the sky. Clouds scudded by. But the rain had stopped. If tomorrow held clearer weather, then the Tyrells would witness her at her most potent. "We make camp here for the night," she declared. "I want sentries posted. No fires more than necessary. We don't want them to think we hide an army in the woods. Keep it small and calm." The men agreed, setting up a perimeter. Daenerys watched as the dragons meandered through the trees, nibbling at branches or huffing at the scent of distant cattle. She ensured they were fed with salted mutton they'd carried, though she suspected the smell of fresh game tempted them. Carlior especially swiveled his head whenever a breeze brought him the smell of livestock. She had no wish to offend the Tyrells by allowing her dragons to torch their herds uninvited, so she commanded them to remain near camp. They obeyed, mostly. Meraxes needed a few stern words in Valyrian and a firm tug on the harness to keep her from bounding off. By moonrise, they had settled in. Dothraki riders patrolled the orchard's boundary, while the knights and a few sellswords ate a thin supper. Daario retold his encounter with Lady Olenna, imitating her acerbic wit. "She called me a cocky peacock and asked if my teeth were as yellow as my clothes. But I do believe she liked me well enough." He winked. Or at least, she recognized the novelty. Daenerys sat on a simple wooden log near the low fire. She was not hungry. She found herself staring into the flames, imagining the next day's meeting. Every alliance made her stronger, but also more vulnerable, for it tied her fate to the complexities of Westerosi politics. She wondered if this was how Aegon the Conqueror felt when he negotiated with the Lords of the Reach. Or had he simply used fire and blood until they knelt? She didn't want to reduce the world to cinders. She wanted to rule a living, breathing land. She slept fitfully. Dawn arrived with crisp air and patchy sunlight. The orchard glistened from the night's moisture. Her retinue readied themselves quickly, wiping dew from saddles, whispering prayers to foreign gods. Daenerys, dressed in her same riding leathers, combed out her hair and placed the slim circlet on her brow. She spoke in low tones to Carlior before mounting him. He growled in acknowledgement, shaking out his wings. Rakharo, mounted on Caesar's, and another Dothraki rider, Jomo, on Meraxes, took positions. The rest of the men would follow a short distance behind. Daario would ride near her, unarmed except for his dagger. By the Tyrell's request that each side come in peace, she had not insisted upon the same from them. She had her dragons instead. The short flight to the meeting place felt tense, each wing beat echoing in her ears. The three dragons soared low over grassy plains marked by winding streams. Ahead, she saw a gentle slope, leading to a rise where a pair of bright tents stood. One was white with green trim, the Tyrell colors, embroidered with golden roses. The other was turquoise, matching Daario's banner. Around them, a ring of mounted knights wearing green cloaks. At the sight of dragons in the sky, the Tyrell formation broke, horses spooking at the sudden roar of wings. Some knights pulled back their mounts. Shields lifted in reflex. Daenerys guided Carlior downward, careful to keep a wide perimeter so as not to incite panic. She signaled Rakharo and Jomo to land a few dozen paces away from the tents, far enough to give the Tyrells comfort, but near enough that the dragon's presence could not be ignored. The creatures folded their wings, tails lashing. Steam rose from their nostrils in the cooler morning air. Knights reined in their horses, muttering to each other. Daenerys slid from the saddle, Daario at her side. She walked forward, chin up, posture relaxed but confident. Each step felt measured against the backdrop of 1,000 steel points, though in truth it might only be a few dozen Tyrell soldiers. Presently, the flap of the white and green tent opened. A tall, willowy young woman emerged first. Margaery Tyrell, if Daenerys recalled correctly from descriptions. Behind her came another woman, shorter, older, yet with a sharp intelligence in her gaze, clad in a gown of pale green with gold thread. Lady Olenna, the Queen of Thorns. Beside them strode Soloras Tyrell, face carefully composed, wearing polished armor with rose motifs. A handful of attendants followed. Lady Olenna surveyed Daenerys from head to toe, then lifted her chin to regard the dragons. Her face remained inscrutable, though a flicker of awe flashed across her eyes. "Well," she said, "you certainly brought an interesting escort. My compliments on your flamboyant approach." The Tornorops. Daenerys inclined her head, stepping closer. She could practically taste the tension in the air. She was keenly aware of Rakaro and Jomo, each perched on a dragon behind her, ready to unleash fire if something went amiss. But she smiled politely. "Thank you for agreeing to meet, Lady Olenna. My name is Daenerys Targaryen. I am grateful for this courtesy." Marguerite dipped a small curtsy, her face calm. "Welcome to the Reach, Your Grace. My grandmother has spoken of little else these past days." Lady Olenna let out a harem. "I had to see for myself if the tales were true. 10 dragons, they said. Why not 100 or 1,000? People do love to exaggerate. And yet here you stand with 3, and the rest, I take it, are perched somewhere at your beck and call." "They remain at Storm's End, my lady," Daenerys replied. "But, yes, there are 10 in total." Olenna's lips parted in a humorless smile. "Well, I hope you've enough goats to feed them, or you'll be snatching up the local peasantry to fill their bellies. We've had enough trouble feeding our armies of men, let alone armies of flying beasts." She turned her gaze pointedly to the knights behind Daenerys. "And these? They look like a motley crew. Some men of the Stormlands, some Sellswords, and, oh my, Dothraki. I'd heard rumors, but I never imagined those dark, savage horse lords would follow anyone across the sea." Daenerys lifted her chin. "They follow me by choice. I freed them from a life of small, shriveled horizons. Now, they ride with me, as brothers. And they do not raid your fields or harm your people, if that is your concern." "Never be." Olenna snorted. "If they did, the realm would be in an uproar. The lords think Dothraki are beasts. But I suppose it takes more than rumor to shape the future. Come, we've prepared a pavilion. Let us speak openly about what you intend here, and what you offer the Tyrells in return." She gestured toward the tent, and Daenerys followed. The knights parted to allow her passage. Dario, Rakaro, and Marguerite's sworn shield stepped inside as well. The interior was warm, lit by lanterns, with a circular table draped in embroidered cloth. A faint aroma of lemon cakes and spiced wine wafted from a side table. The effect was almost homely, if not for the tension humming through every occupant. Once seated, Lady Olenna wasted no time with trivialities. "The realm is in chaos. We have Lannisters in King's Landing, Baratheon remnants scattered, Greyjoys raiding the coast. If the rumors are to be believed, and now you arrive with dragons and claim to be the rightful queen. A Targaryen has not sat on the throne since Robert's rebellion. Why should we trust that you will be different from your father, the so-called Mad King?" "Nay." Daenerys folded her hands. "Because I am not him. I have seen war's horrors up close. I have freed slaves in Essos. I do not relish cruelty. My father's madness died with him. I seek to rebuild, not to burn indiscriminately." The old woman studied her with narrowed eyes. "Rebuilding is all well and good, but that requires coin and stability. The Tyrells hold a good part of the realm's breadbasket, and a fair portion of its wealth. We have a vested interest in seeing a stable king, or queen, on the Iron Throne, one who won't drive the country into famine, or incite endless vengeance. At present, we are allied with the Lannisters, though I must confess the arrangement lacks charm." Memnonedal. Marguerite, who had been silent thus far, spoke gently. "My brother is sworn to defend King Joffrey, but we have seen how that boy king behaves. He is difficult." Ser Loras, arms crossed, gave a tiny nod. "Joffrey lacks virtue. My sister tries to see the good in him, but it is scarce." Daenerys latched onto that opening. "You wish to break from the Lannisters? I can offer you recognition of the Tyrells' authority over the Reach, a place in my new council. I would also ensure trade routes are protected, that your harvests feed the realm without interruption or undue burden. In return, I ask your swords, your banners, and your loyalty. I intend to take the throne. I intend to take the throne." Lady Olenna sniffed. "And if we say no, you'll bring your dragons and turn Highgarden into a smoking ruin. You might manage it. Though I suspect we could do some damage to your pretty beasts before it's through. Daenerys met her gaze without wavering. I do not wish to scorch Highgarden or any seat of the Reach. My dragons are not a threat unless forced. I want your goodwill, not your destruction. Olenna tapped the table with a bony finger. Good words. But politics is a dance, child. You say you'll be a good queen, but even the best intentions can lead to terrible ends if the storms of war rage too fiercely. What of the Lannisters? How do you propose to handle them? And that so-called King Stannis? Will you chase them from the capital with dragonfire and damn the consequences to the small folk? Daenerys inhaled slowly. The Lannisters used cruelty and cunning to maintain their hold. I will challenge them, but I intend to minimize civilian suffering. As for Stannis, he claims the throne by right of being Robert's heir, but the realm hardly flocks to him. He has turned to shadow magic, by rumor, which does not bode well for the common people. By rumor which does not bode well for the... Olenna's eyes flashed. Shadow magic. Superstitious nonsense or not. He did defeat Renly under suspicious circumstances. We have not forgotten. My granddaughter was to be queen to Renly. She motioned to Margaery. So you might say we Tyrells have reason to see Stannis undone. Margaery's face remained poised. If you truly uphold your promise of justice, I would see the man who stole Renly's life pay for it. Daenerys softened her tone. I understand your loss. Renly might have been a good king, or at least a kind one, but you have the chance to shape the future now. If you join me, we will remove Joffrey from the throne, chase Stannis from his illusions, and restore peace. I cannot promise a war-free conquest, but I promise it will be swifter and more just than letting Lannisters and Baratheons bicker forever while the small folk starve. Lady Olenna pursed her lips, considering. You speak as though you have the Seven's blessing in your pocket, but I have lived long enough to see sweet promises spoil. Yet, I will say this. King Joffrey's reign has begun with cruelty, and we Tyrells see no bright future at his side. If we decide to shift our loyalty, we will want more than sweet words. We will want an arrangement that ensures the Reach retains its dignity and power. We are not your servants to be tossed aside after you win. We must be partners. Daenerys nodded. You would have seats on my council. Your harvests would be prized. I would have no reason to hamper your influence. A queen cannot rule alone. Margaery tilted her head, curiosity creeping into her expression. And what of alliances through marriage? My betrothal to Joffrey was part of the reason the Lannisters welcomed us. Are you in search of a consort? Daenerys felt a slight jolt. Marriage alliances were a staple of Westerosi politics, but she had barely considered them. Her own heart was still mending from Khal Drogo's passing, and the idea of wedding for political gain churned her stomach. But she could not ignore the reality of the game. If that is something you insist upon, we can discuss it further, but I cannot commit to a match out of mere necessity. My cause must remain about the realm, not just about forging a convenient union. Olenna gave a small nod. A prudent answer. There are other ways to seal alliances. Still, it is a consideration. You are a young queen, child. The lords of Westeros feel more at ease when they see a proper line of succession. Daenerys' hand tightened on the table's edge. I will do what must be done for the good of the realm, but I will not be forced into a marriage that turns me into a puppet. Nor should you, Olenna said, surprisingly gentle. We will weigh the matter. For now, let us speak of simpler steps. For instance, how might we stage your approach to King's Landing? If the Tyrell armies march from the south while you threaten from the skies and the sea, we might squeeze the Lannisters. But the city has walls, and the Red Keep is no trifling fortress. We also have a sense that Tyrion Lannister is stockpiling something. Wildfire, we suspect. Rumor says he has a monstrous chain across the bay, and the alchemists are at work day and night. Daenerys recalled the nightmares of green fire. I know something of wildfire. My father was fond of it. If they plan to fling it at us, we must be cautious. Dragon flame can ignite it easily. A single spark can set half the city ablaze. Margaery frowned. We want to free the city, not destroy it. There are countless innocents in those alleys and squares. If we immolate them, we earn nothing but hatred. Ness. A hush fell. They all recognized the weight of that truth. Finally, Daenerys spoke. Then perhaps a siege is more prudent. Cut off supplies, starve the Lannisters out, but give the small folk safe passage if they wish to leave. I can lead some targeted strikes with the dragons, shattering gatehouses or towers. But I will not douse the city in flame. That is how you might earn the hearts of the people. Olenna mused. If you let them out, feed them if they come, and show that you don't blame them for the Lannisters' crimes. Word travels fast in a city living on stale bread. Margaery's eyes gleamed. And so the seeds of a new reign are planted. We can starve the lion in his den, while your dragons circle above, a constant reminder of what will happen if they refuse to yield. The Tyrells might be the ones to handle the city's farmland approach, ensuring that no supply caravans slip through. Meanwhile, you keep the bay sealed, or threaten it from Storm's End and Dragonstone. Daenerys nodded, mind racing with the implications. And I have another potential ally in Volantene ships. I could relocate some to watch the Gullet intercept any trade from the Narrow Sea. Stannis' fleet might be a wild card, but we'll see how that plays out. He despises the Lannisters as much as we do, though he'd never accept me on the throne. Olenna let out a sigh. Very well. We can begin to shape these plans into something coherent, but this is not an agreement yet. I must consult with my lords, my bannermen. You will have to demonstrate your sincerity. No raids on the Reach, no forced tributes from our fields. In turn, we will hold off sending further assistance to King's Landing. If we come to terms, we could shift openly to your side. If not, we will remain neutral at best. Are you amenable to that, child? Meben sighed her. Daenerys inclined her head respectfully. I am. I will leave you to your counsel. But please do not wait too long. The realm burns while we tarry. She noted the small, knowing smile on Margaery's lips, the calculating glint in Olenna's eyes. Sir Loras said little, but his gaze lingered on Daenerys, with a mixture of wariness and admiration. Perhaps even a flicker of envy at the majesty of her dragons. Part of her wanted to reassure him that she understood grief for Renly, but this was neither the time nor place. Olenna stood, rummaging in a small satchel. She pulled out a single white rose, freshly cut. Here, a token. We Tyrells are known for our flowers, and while I prefer thorns, perhaps you'll accept a gentler symbol. She extended it to Daenerys. A sign of good faith that I haven't told my knights to bury you where you stand. Daenerys accepted the rose, its petals pearly in the lamplight. Thank you, Lady Olenna. She paused. I have a gift for you as well, if you wish it. Dragonfire can do more than destroy. My forges can craft dragon steel stronger than normal steel. I have instructed my blacksmith to create a small blade with a rose embossed on the hilt. If we come to a final accord, it will be yours. A token of the bond between our houses. Olenna blinked, somewhat taken aback. Then she sniffed, trying to hide the intrigue in her eyes. We shall see if such a day arrives. Now be off with you, child. I have much to discuss with my granddaughter, and these assorted lords who fancy themselves important. Keep your dragons from scorching the fields. Harvest time is nearly upon us. With that, Daenerys and her party withdrew. Outside, the Tyrell knights gave them space. Rakaro and Jomo sat astride Caesares and Meraxes, watchful. Carlior greeted Daenerys with a low rumble and a puff of sulfur-scented breath. Dario adjusted his gloves, eyes dancing. They didn't slit your throat. That's a good start. Daenerys managed a small laugh. Yes, quite. Now we wait to see if they will join me or remain tethered to the lion. She swung back into Carlior's saddle. With a command in Valyrian, the golden dragon spread his wings, flapped, and took to the sky. The rest followed, rising above the tents and watchers below. Daenerys peered down, glimpsing Lady Olenna standing at the tent's threshold. squinting at the passing dragons with an expression too distant to read. Marguerite stood beside her, one hand on the older woman's arm, the other shading her eyes from the sun. Then they shrank to dots in a sea of green, replaced by an endless tapestry of farmland. The future hinged on the Tyrells, but it was not the only piece in play. By forging this uncertain alliance, Daenerys had flicked the first domino. If the Tyrells did come to her cause, King's Landing might fold without a drawn-out siege. But if they wavered, she would have to secure the city by other means. She glanced at the rose still in her hand, petals trembling in the wind. It seemed a fragile thing, easily crushed. She tucked it into the lapel of her riding gear. Perhaps it would survive the journey. They made camp again a safe distance from the Tyrell host. Dario joked that they ought to feast on rose petals in celebration, but Daenerys' mood remained subdued. She knew the Tyrells were as dangerous as any lion, especially if cornered. She posted extra scouts around the perimeter, worried that Lannister outriders might approach from the King's Landing direction. As she swallowed a few bites of hard bread and goat cheese, she tried to plan ahead. Timelines, possible routes to the capital, supply lines from Storm's End, a contingency if the Tyrells chose betrayal. Later, as dusk settled, she decided on a brief flight patrol. She could cover more ground in an hour of flying than her men could in a day on horseback. Mounting Carlier, she soared west over the fields, scanning for suspicious movement. An approaching army, a cunning flank. The sky glowed with the last hints of sunset, painting the horizon in rose and orange. She discovered nothing more dangerous than a few small villages preparing for nightfall, candles flickering in windows. From above, she saw a farmstead with a courtyard well, a man hoisting a bucket. He paused, craning his neck at the sight of a dragon overhead. Daenerys wished she could land and assure him that she meant no harm, but that gesture might cause more panic than relief. Instead, she gave Carlier a gentle tug on the reins, circling away. When she returned to camp, the stars had emerged in full splendor. Rakharo reported no incidents. Dario teased a pair of knights with outlandish stories about the time I made love to a Lysine pirate queen. Dany found a quiet spot near a small campfire, absent-mindedly petting Carlier's scaly flank as he settled behind her. The dragon's warmth radiated like a living furnace. She let her eyes close, just for a moment, savoring that heat against the cool evening air. She drifted into a half-sleep, lulled by the soft crackle of fire and the rhythmic thumping of Carlier's heart, audible if she pressed an ear close enough. In her drowsy state, she imagined her father's voice drifting on the wind. "Burn them all," he said, echoing from the hidden corners of memory. She shook her head, forcing that phantom aside. She would not be that kind of Targaryen. Never. Her eyelids snapped open when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Rakharo jumped to his feet, hand on Arak hilt. There, at the edge of camp, rode a Tyrell messenger wearing green livery. His horse snorted and danced nervously at the sight of the dragons. But the man held firm, raising a white cloth in one hand. Daenerys exchanged a glance with Rakharo, then beckoned him to bring the rider closer. The messenger, an older fellow with a graying beard, bowed from horseback. "My queen, Lady Olenna, requests you remain in the area for a few more days while she confers with her bannermen. She asked me to deliver an invitation to speak again if circumstances change. She also bade me say that you should keep your dragons from their cattle fields, or the negotiations might sour quickly." Dany nodded, stifling a smile. "We will respect her lands. Does she want me closer to Bitterbridge, or at a distance?" "Nebennikin. At your discretion, but she suggests you do not encroach on the main encampment. Tensions remain high. Sir Loras had to call more than a few lords who fear your dragons might roast us in our tents. I understand their fears. Please tell Lady Olenna I will remain in this area for a few days. If she decides to speak again, I'll come. Otherwise, I will return to Storm's End." The messenger bowed again. "As you say, my queen." He departed, hooves thudding. Daenerys rubbed her temples. "A waiting game," she muttered. Rakharo shrugged, unbothered by the pause. Dothraki were used to swift conquests or quick raids, but they had learned patience under her rule. Dario, however, seemed restless. pacing around camp like a caged cat. He hated inactivity almost as much as he loved risk. Still, Daenerys insisted on staying put. Each day she rose at dawn, soared out with Carlior or Caesarys to survey the region. She counted the Tyrell banners, serpentined in the wind, thousands of tents, a veritable field of men. Sometimes, from a distance, she glimpsed bright colors signifying high lords among their retinues. She saw wagons of grain, herds of sheep corralled for the armies, barrels of mead or ale, an entire traveling city, waiting to see which side the Tyrells would choose. She also used the time to train her dragons in controlled bursts of fire, ensuring they would not provoke a response. The next day, a new messenger arrived, this one bearing more neutral tidings. Lady Olenna appreciated her restraint, recognized the difficulty of sustaining so many dragons in the field, and would welcome a second meeting soon. It was a dance indeed. Daenerys felt the Tyrell matriarch testing her resolve, evaluating every rumor about the Targaryen queen. But each message carried a subtle shift in tone. Less guarded, more curious. On the evening of the fourth day, as a drizzle misted over the orchard, the Tyrell standard appeared again at the edge of Daenerys' camp. This time the rider brought a small, carefully wrapped parcel. He said only, "Lady Margaery asked me to deliver this gift to your grace." Then he departed. Daenerys unwrapped it within her tent, curious. It was a golden pin shaped like a rose, inlaid with tiny emeralds that sparkled like dew. A note in delicate handwriting read, "May it serve as a reminder of the blossoming future. N. Tyrell. Daenerys let the pin rest in her palm. The metal caught the lantern light. She smiled to herself, tucking it beside Olenna's white rose, which she had pressed between the pages of a blank notebook. Perhaps alliances could indeed be built on more than necessity. Perhaps something akin to friendship could grow, though she would never be naive enough to trust blindly. Dario peeked into the tent, remarking, "A trinket from the rose, eh? Perhaps she's smitten." Dany rolled her eyes but said nothing. She found herself wondering about Margaery's quiet grace, her polite concern for the small folk. Was she truly as kind as she seemed, or was it a mask? In the Game of Thrones, illusions abounded. On the fifth day, a final message arrived. Lady Olenna requested Daenerys' presence once again, at an open field near a windmill by dusk. Come prepared to discuss an agreement. Daenerys' heart quickened. She ordered her retinue to ready themselves. She took only Caesarys this time, leaving Carlior with Rockero to manage the rest of the camp. If things soured, she could always summon the others. But perhaps a single dragon might be less intimidating and more conducive to peace. Flying alone on Caesarys, she arrived at the designated field, a stretch of meadow tinted gold by the setting sun. A small pavilion had been erected. She could see Lady Olenna, Margaery, Sir Loras, and a handful of guards. No vast host. Caesarys alighted, huffing plumes of pale smoke. Dany dismounted and walked forward, wearing her circlet and a crimson cloak. She felt the hush of the moment settle over them. Margaery smiled warmly. Olenna stood resolute, chin high. Sir Loras offered a courteous bow. Olenna spoke first. "We have conferred, my queen. The Tyrells have decided that the Lannisters are not the future. They burned too many bridges, literally in some cases, and that Boy King has no sense of caution. We also cannot abide Stannis' rumored dabbling in shadows. Therefore, we will support your claim, but we have conditions." Daenerys nodded. "I am listening." Olenna took a breath. "We want a formal guarantee of the Reach's traditional rights, a vow that you will not strip our lords of lands or titles without just cause. We also want to ensure that the supply of grain to the Crown lands will remain under Tyrell's supervision once you ascend to the throne, so we can manage distribution effectively. Additionally, we want a seat on your small council, specifically for Margaery or her chosen representative." Sir Loras cleared his throat. "And if I may, your grace, I would wish to serve as Master of Arms or Lord Commander of the King's Guard. I was known as the Knight of Flowers, but I am no stranger to war." "Men," Daenerys considered. "I can promise that the Reach's rightful lords will remain in place, so long as they bend the knee and abide by the realm's laws. I have no interest in plundering your domain. As for the Crownland's grain supply, we do need to feed the city, but I will trust the Tyrell expertise in doing so fairly. A seat on the small council is granted, if that is your wish. And Sir Loras, you are a skilled knight. I have heard tales of your prowess. I would be honored to have you serve the throne in such a capacity. No. Olenna eyed her carefully. You speak with an open hand. That is good. If we formalize this alliance, your war becomes ours. Our armies will march on King's Landing. But we must coordinate carefully. We do not want the city going up in flames if the Lannisters grow desperate. Starve them out, yes, but let the commoners escape. Once inside the city, your men must respect the peace. Daenerys nodded, feeling relief mix with the dread of what still lay ahead. Agreed. No senseless slaughter. We will bring justice, not chaos. Netanyahu? Margaery stepped forward, smiling. Then the Tyrells pledge their arms and resources to you, Daenerys Targaryen, rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms. May we see a new springtime for Westeros under your rule. Daenerys smiled back, a warmth kindling in her chest. She extended her hand, and Margaery placed hers atop it, while Olenna gave a curt nod. Arms folded. A hush seemed to envelop them all, as if the wind itself paused to witness. This was the moment that would change everything. The Tyrell rose would no longer entwine with the Lannister lion. It would reach for the dragon instead. They set the final arrangements in swift strokes. A formal document to be signed once Daenerys reached Highgarden after the city was secured. A vow of friendship, and strategic points to close roads leading to King's Landing. Loras offered to ride south at once, rallying Tyrell vassals to prepare for the march. Margaery and Olenna would linger a bit, ensuring that the main force coordinated with Daenerys. After all was done, they parted with measured courtesy, each side aware that the real test lay in dethroning Joffrey and outmaneuvering the Lannister cunning. As Daenerys mounted Caesarea to return to camp, she felt a stirring in her heart. This was not a victory by fire, but by words and mutual respect. Perhaps she was already forging a different legacy from her father. She clutched the rose pin Margaery had given her, pinned to her cloak. For once, hope did not seem a fragile illusion, but something that could blossom if carefully tended. She took to the sky in the dying light. Below her, she saw the green-gold fields of the Reach stretching out like a promise. The faint shape of the Tyrell host beyond, tens of thousands of spears that now would turn in her favor. For the first time, the possibility of taking King's Landing without drowning it in a tidal wave of dragonfire seemed real. Yet she reminded herself, the Lannisters would not simply surrender. Cersei was cunning, Tyrion was cunning in his own right, and Tywin Lannister, if alive and active, was the type to orchestrate vicious countermeasures. She would face them all soon. The roads to the throne were drenched in blood, but if alliances like this one could be made, perhaps they would see a new dawn at the end of it. When she arrived back at her camp, the men stirred anxiously, searching her face for signs of triumph or defeat. She answered them with a soft smile and 2 words. "They've joined?" A roar went up, jubilant and disbelieving. Dothraki whooped, knights clapped each other on the back, and Dario gave her a theatrical bow. Even Rakaro grinned, though he refrained from cheering outright. Daenerys dismounted Caesarea, passing a hand over his warm scales in thanks. She felt exhilarated and exhausted in equal measure. Tomorrow, they would begin the real work of coordinating a movement on King's Landing. But for one brief moment, she let herself bask in the victory that was not bought with flame, but with negotiation. This was a taste of the queen she aspired to be, fierce when necessary, merciful when possible, forging alliances that might outlast any single war. Night fell, and fires sparked in the orchard, ringed by men telling tales of a queen and her dragons who made roses bloom. Daenerys found a quiet spot near the largest fire, accepted a warm cup of mead that someone pressed into her hand, and watched the sparks climb into the star-flecked sky. Caesarius curled nearby, half dozing, exhaling slow bursts of heat. She sipped the mead and felt its sweetness on her tongue. 5 hours would not be enough to navigate all that lay ahead. The labyrinth of threats, shifting loyalties, a capital city overshadowed by wildfire. But for tonight, at least, she felt her burdens lighten. The orchard's night breeze carried the faint scent of roses. She wondered if Lady Olenna slept well tonight, or if she too lay awake pondering the uncertain future. In a realm of lions and stags, the rose and the dragon might bring about a new season of growth. It gave her hope. She let her eyelids drift shut, lulled by the crackle of flames and the soft rustle of dragon wings. The story would continue, slow as a winding river, and she would meet every bend with caution and resolve. The ghosts of her father's madness no longer felt so close. Perhaps she dared to believe she could carve a kinder name for House Targaryen. Guided by the roars of her brood and the quiet promise of alliances made in good faith. For the first time since she hatched her eggs, she dreamed not of burning thrones, but of a land in bloom, shining under the wings of dragons who offered warmth, not destruction. And in that dream, the night stretched on gently, a safe harbor in the midst of the storm.